How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. I'm looking forward to answering your questions about my work.
Okay, let's start then. You are changing the context of the artworks with your works, especially with your performances and wearable art pieces from the 90s. You make them more accessible and closer to people. You take them out of the gallery spaces. I was wondering what inspired you to do that?
Well, I was really inspired by the work that I was doing. I was working on life-size figures, and I wanted my work to appeal to a broader audience. I was a member of a artist-run gallery in Soho in the late 70s, early 80s,
Mhm.
and getting people into exhibitions was a real chore, and it was disappointing to have so few people see my work. So while I was working on one of these life-size figures, I got the idea if I could put myself into the sculpture, then I could present my work in more public venues like museums, galleries, and street corners.
Right, and did you get any weird feedbacks from people?
It was always very exciting because it was so interactive. People would be fooled
Mhm.
by my performance, and then they would sort of slide back and wait for somebody else to get fooled. I
Right.
did unannounced go to the New Jersey State Museum in Trenton, and I walked in and installed myself, and the security guards there got very, very upset, and they hauled me off into their office. Fortunately, I was rescued by a curator
Wow.
who was familiar with my work and invited me to participate in a reception they were having at the museum at the time.
Right. For your artistic career, you have been experimenting with different materials and techniques. Which one were the biggest challenges for you, and which one are your favorites to work with?
Well, the biggest challenge is working on a large figural sculpture, just between making an armature and I was building these pieces out of little chips of wood.
Mhm.
It was quite a challenge to do that. And now working digitally, I just feel as though it's so suited to where I'm at this point. I have a very good interaction with the digital technology and feel as
Right.
though I can get a lot done with that.
You use a lot of technology, as you mentioned, in creating your art. And for me, the most fascinating aspect of your art creations are your digital images, especially made with the scanner. And the fact that it was a way of showing how digital technology records and perceive the visual information. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, the scanner images were sort of a bridge between the performance art and the digital imaging.
Mhm.
I realized that a scanner creates an image by building one line at a time. And so I performed on the scanner bed. I would take my hands and
Mhm.
wind up almost choreographing a dance for the scanner. At the end of the scan, I would see the image, and then many times I would see where I needed to make adjustments to my performance, so to speak. And so I would redo that. And sometimes after 5 or 10 tries, I would wind up with an image that I felt really expressed what I wanted to say.
Right. So in a way, because you didn't know what the result will be, you have to each time like see what you came up with and then like adjust everything and change if needed.
Yeah, it was a very sort of experimental
Mhm.
process. And the more I did it, the more I became aware of how to sort of work with the scanner to create the effect that I wanted to.
Yeah. Let's talk now about your round prints displayed at Alpha Arts Gallery current exhibition, Shifted Nature. Tell us about the technique you are using to create them.
Well, I start with one of my photographs and I look for something that appeals to me in the photograph. I enhance the photograph and then I duplicate the layer and I maneuver the layers to sort of get a slice of the image that I feel works. And then I keep making new slices and adding that. So it's a 360-degree round circular image in the end.
And did you experiment it with another shape before than the round circle ones?
Yeah, I did a series of collages, sort of a little like what David Hockney did. David Hockney took
Mhm.
photographs and sort of collaged them together to create images that were not necessarily rectangular. And I did the same thing. Some of them wound up being circular, and a lot of them were sort of these very odd shapes depending on what I was actually photographing. So I would just take a lot of different photographs from different points of view and then put them all together, collage them into one larger image.
Right. When I look at your prints, if I wouldn't see the title, I wouldn't know what I'm looking at, which I absolutely love because it allows me to put my own interpretation onto your works. And I was wondering, how would you like your art to be perceived by your viewers?
Well, there's sort of two levels of perception, I guess. The first one is the initial reaction, and that's usually from a distance. Someone will see something.
Mhm.
And in that case, I want the sort of the color and the forms and the shape to sort of spark a curiosity and an interest in the image. And then as the person approaches the image and gets closer, they can look at the details and get involved in how all the shapes, the forms, and the colors interact and get drawn into the image.
I think this is exactly what makes your work so unique because from the distance, when we see it, we see just like an abstract shape. But then as we get closer, we can see like each element and what it has been made of. And yeah,
Yes.
it's amazing.
Yep. Thank you.
um, I want to mention now one of my favorite piece of yours from the works that are displayed at the Alfa Art Gallery exhibition, and this is Pepito Chili Peppers. I see a very detailed abstract form. And I want to ask you, how does your creation process was in this example? Did you already had in mind the idea, what it's going to look like before taking pictures of chili peppers, or did you experiment it by constructing while having a photo?
Well, all the images that I do, I have sometimes I have a sort of a vague sense, but for the most part, it is experimenting and
Mhm.
seeing what happened. But that image grew out of the COVID-19 quarantine where I couldn't really travel that much because of, well, everyone was limited because of the quarantine. So one of the big adventures for me was going to the market and buying fruits and vegetables. And when I was there, I started getting involved in the display of the fruit and vegetables and the images. So I took my iPhone out and started taking pictures of the food displays, and that got me involved in doing foods. And then I also started looking at different foods to work with, and I was sort of drawn to the chili peppers because of the long, sort of stringy appearance of them. So I bought 2 bags of those and brought them home and set them up on a copy stand and photographed them. So sometimes I would photograph the food in the shops, and sometimes I would buy things and photograph them at home on a copy stand.
Well, I'm very happy that this difficult situation, in fact, made you create this amazing series of photographs of food.
Thanks. Yep.
um, I'm wondering what is more important to you when you do the pictures of objects? Is it a shape or is it a color or maybe both?
Well, it's really the whole gestalt. I mean, it's the shape, the
Mm.
color, what is a picture of, how the different layers interact with one another, what happens when the shapes of the colors are repeated, and how that sort of creates an image. So I'm really looking at a lot of different things when I start to construct one of these images, and they are really constructed like one slice at a time, and each slice being rotated a certain number of degrees so that it winds up in a more circular shape.
Right. Can you tell us how do you choose the themes of your works? Because you've created images with so many different themes from like flora, fauna, minerals, buildings, cars, bikes, and the list goes on. But you don't have many pieces that involves the um, representation of people. And is it your artistic choice?
Well, the first part is the question is the themes really come out of the work. I find that in terms of the cars I was interested in, I just started getting interested in photographing cars and the design of cars and how the colors of the exterior and how the forms are defined. So I wound up taking pictures of cars and making images from that. And the more I did that, after a while, I had 5, 10, or 15 of these images. And I thought, well, this is a theme now. I've done so many images. So the themes really come out of the work. I become interested in one subject. And then as that evolves, that becomes a theme. In terms of people, I did do a photograph of myself and sort of worked with it in that sort of circular format, but I was not happy with the result. But I have used images of like Van Gogh and American Gothic, and I've used those in images, and that seems to work. When I'm dealing with a figure in a broader context, then I think that works. But as a singular portrait, it doesn't really quite work.
Right. So if you need to have like a really strong intention to put a portrait into your works, otherwise it's yeah, you need like a really good reason. Is
Yeah.
that what I understood? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also how this sort of figure relates to the environment and what can be done with that. At some point, I may explore that a little more.
Sure. Now I want to ask you about your favorite piece that's now currently displayed at Alfa Art Gallery. Which one is it that you are the most attached to?
Well, I really am sort of engaged with the view of the Hudson from the Whitney Museum. That was one of the first pieces where the sort of the broader shape from a distance, when you look at it, it looks like a sort of a science fiction spaceship. And then on closer inspection, you can see that it is really the screen, and it is, if you're familiar with the Whitney, you may be able to put that together. But it just, the image sort of is so transformed from what the interior of the Whitney looked like. And then, of course, there are the couple of little people sprinkled in there, and that sort of adds a whole other sort of mystery to the picture.
Thank you very much. I don't have any more questions. It was my pleasure talking to you today. I'm happy you were able to join us today.
Oh, it was my pleasure too. Thank you.